Hello guys, in this video I want to show you open source alternatives to mainly used Windows apps you can use on Windows, but also of course on Linux, and want to be free from proprietary software where you have sometimes to pay monthly just to use the software. First of all, I want to explain what's open source. Open source means that the source code of a program is open. So you can see it, you can read it. And if we speak about free software, this is the real open source, then you are also allowed to use it freely in any way you want. You can change it. You can just do everything with the software what you want to. So there's a difference between the normal freeware, so to say, and the real free software, which is also called sometimes open source software. The free software, like for example TeamViewer, you are free to use it, but you are not too free to adapt it, to use it any way you want. For example, if you're a company, you have to pay for it. These are the differences, and in this video we want to cover real free software like open source software. I hope I could clarify this point, and I would say let's start right through with the first program I guess all of you are familiar with, and that's called Microsoft Office, of course. You can do text writing, you can do calculation, presentations, and so on. And some people don't know that there are similar alternatives which are quite powerful and in many ways completely free to use without any plan or trial version. And the first one, very publicly known, is LibreOffice. LibreOffice is a very cool office suite which comes with text editor, calculation, PowerPoint-like features, and so on. So you can do almost everything you can do with the Microsoft Office suite, you can also create with LibreOffice. But there's a difference between LibreOffice and Microsoft Office. This is the file format. Microsoft Office uses the very well-known docx format, Excel format, or PowerPoint format, so the .ppt in the end, for example, and LibreOffice is using another document formats. These are called open document formats, and they are not as compatible if you want to use, for example, an ODT file on Microsoft Office, or if you want to use a docx file on LibreOffice. This generally works, but then you have some weird formatting issues and so on. So if you want to search for a better Microsoft Office format support, especially if you are dependent on this, then there's also the software which is called OnlyOffice. OnlyOffice is just like LibreOffice, but it works really well with the Microsoft formats, and it also has vast functionality, so this could be also a possible solution. And in the end, there's another software which is in the end only the normal freeware and not the real free software, and this is called SoftMaker FreeOffice. SoftMaker FreeOffice is an equivalent to Microsoft Office and is also directly published as an best free alternative to Microsoft Office, and I could really underline that because it's very easy to use and it's very similar to Microsoft Office. So these are the both alternatives if you want to stay in the Microsoft format space. But if you just want to use an Office suite and just want to create documents, then I'm personally recommending you LibreOffice because it is the most capable of all the three. But these are very good alternatives and all of them are free to use. So it could be a big advantage to Microsoft 365 or Microsoft Office because you have to pay some fees monthly or yearly to use the software, and you don't really have to because there's also great free software out there. Trust me. And you can also use all these three software projects on a Mac or, for example, on Windows, but also, of course, on Linux, which I also selected for this video. So all software I present you today is runnable on both Windows and Linux, and also in many cases on a Mac. Let's come to another case. You are really dependent using a Microsoft Office suite. Then you could use, for example, the web version. Microsoft Office is also available just from your web browser. This also works very good in Linux. But also in the end of this video, I present you a method where you can run all Windows software very easily on your Linux machine. So if you want to know this, just keep watching until the end. Let's come to another very famous app probably some of you are using out there. And this is called Adobe Photoshop. With Adobe Photoshop, you can really easy manipulate images, enhance them, edit them, and so on. But there's also some free software you could use. And one of this software is GIMP, which is most capable of. GIMP is a free image manipulation program, it calls itself, and it's quite easy to use nowadays and also completely free and open source. And it has almost all tools which you are also familiar to Adobe Photoshop. So I personally am using GIMP very often and I don't miss any features from Adobe Photoshop, for example. Also, there's a great community about this, so you will find many instructions how to use it, and in many cases it really behaves like Adobe Photoshop, so this is great. But if we come to AI tools, then GIMP isn't quite on track right now. They are also developing many features, but they are not implemented right into the main version of GIMP. For that, you could use some cloud services. This is honestly not real free open source software, but I'm using it sometimes, and it's called canva.com. With it, you can very easily design some things and also have some AI enhanced tools, which makes it really easy to remove a background and so on. With GIMP, it will take a bit longer. This could also be very helpful if you want to enhance your workflow. But yeah, again, it is not open source, but there are also coming many software products in the free and open source world, which also have similar features. But at the time, I can't really recommend any of these because many of them are in development right now. Let's come to another product, which is also a thing for many artists. If we come to AI or Adobe Illustrator, then you are maybe searching also for an open source alternative, and there is a really good one which is also wide known, and this is called Inkscape. Yeah, Inkscape is a very easy vector graphics program, so just have a look at it if you want to go with an alternative of Adobe. Let's conclude these Adobe family with Adobe Premiere Pro or another similar video editor. One thing I have to say, Adobe has a really good creation software for many multimedia artists, which is quite astonishing. And all these free software projects I showed to you are really great if you want to edit something. Also, if you want to edit something regularly, for example, for the video creation and also for creation of other multimedia content, am using the free products I'm showing you today very often, and I'm very happy with it. But if you have this as a full-time job, then maybe you have to stick to the Adobe software. And if you want to, for example, get away from Windows, then there's only one option to go with this Adobe family or to continue with this Adobe family, and this is on the Mac. This is quite sad that I have to say this to you, that you can't really use it, for example, with Linux. Adobe doesn't release this software under Linux. But for all people of you which aren't making money in their multimedia creation and are just doing it as a hobby, then these free programs I showed to you are really good and are really capable of. And there are also some professionals using the free software, and the software I want to show you as an alternative to Premiere Pro is called Kdenlive, for example. Also, some professionals, as I said, are using this free software like Inkscape, GIMP, Kdenlive, and so on. And they are also creating very good content, videos, images, and so on. But let us come to Kdenlive as an alternative to Adobe Premiere Pro. Kdenlive is open source and can be used for video cutting, for effects, color grading, also audio effects, and so on. So there are many very cool tools you could use with Kdenlive. If you haven't seen this, if you haven't really tried it, I definitely recommend you just to try it out. You have nothing to lose. Let us go away from the multimedia software. Let us come to another software many of you are maybe using daily at work, and this is called Microsoft Outlook. Microsoft Outlook is great for email householding, managing your calendar and contacts, for example. This is just a part of Microsoft 365. There's also great free software if you want to use an email client. If you want to use it in Linux, then you could also try with the web version of Outlook. This is also quite okay. But if you really want to use free software, which I am highly recommending to you for at least trying it, is Thunderbird. I'm using Thunderbird for years, and especially in the last 1 to 2 years, Thunderbird got a lot big updates which improved this overall experience and the workflow by a lot. Just a very good email program, also with calendar and contact integration. You can also, of course, sync your calendar and contacts with Google, Microsoft, but of course also with Nextcloud, for example, which I'm using. It's just a great software. In the last year, they also released an Android app you could use out there, which is also really, really cool and very easy to use. So if you don't use an email client yet, just give it a try. Thunderbird is completely free and open source and is from the developers of Firefox. So there's a quite big organization behind it. I'm using this almost for 10 years, I guess, and it's the best email client I can imagine of at the current point of time. Let us come to another very well-known app, and this is called Microsoft OneNote. So to say, your digital notebook, you can create some notebooks, create some pages and chapters, and yeah, you can just paste anything here. You can write something here, you can do checklists and so on. This is a very cool platform. Also, if we look to the fact that you can really paste in everything, this is very cool. So do we have an exact equivalent, for example, in the free software world? And this is not really the case, but there are some apps which are also very capable of, and one of these are Joplin. Joplin is an excellent note-taking software where you can also have your notebooks, chapters and pages, very easy. You can also access it from the phone, for example, and yeah, you could also just write anything you want, but you cannot handwrite something or mark something down with your pencil. This is the only disadvantage of Joplin. So if you want to write something down by your hand and, for example, also want to mark something in PDF files and so on, then I can really recommend you Xonal++. It is also available for macOS, Windows and Linux. This program does it really good, and I was also using this while going to university. It just helped me a lot in my studies. You could create new documents, you can create new pages, but also you can write on existing PDF files. Very cool. But there's also another tool which I am personally using. I'm personally not using Joplin. There's another app, this is called Obsidian. I'm using this as a knowledge database for everything I know or I want to write down. It's very easy to navigate in. It's very easy to link data in it. In the end, it's just such a great tool, but this is only written for text. You can paste some images, also PDF files in there, but honestly, I'm only using this for text. And this also helped me a lot for my studies, but also, yeah, for my daily life. If I want to note something down, if I want to create instructions, if I want to create a simple to-do list for today. So this tool has it all in. But to be clear, this Obsidian app is not open source, but it's freeware. I read in the last month that the Obsidian developer thinks about open sourcing the whole app, which would be also such a great thing, because then I can fully recommend you Obsidian. But for now, I could just mention it that I'm using this and I am very happy in it, because it's very easy to get your data and your notes structured. Let us come to another alternative. If we look to Linux, maybe you know WinRAR. WinRAR is a very easy tool for compressing, encrypting, backing up some archives. And the really cool thing, we don't have to use WinRAR on Linux, for example. Also macOS has it right built in, I guess, for almost every archive format. So if I, for example, download a sample file here, I don't have to install any app here. I am running on Linux Mint here, but also every Linux distribution just has it right built into it. You can just right click something, choose extract here, and then we have extracted it. We can also create some archives, just right click on a folder, select compress, and then we see all the formats which are supported. For example, 7-zip, exe, gz, .dar, .tar, lzma, war, zip, X, Y, and so on. So very easy, everything. And of course, you can also create some passwords, for example. So you won't need any additional archiving software if you want to switch to Linux, for example. But also just a small hint for 7-zip. 7-zip is also capable of unpacking many archive formats. This is completely free software. It is licensed under the GNU LGPL license. So if you don't have it already under Windows, then it also could be a great tool to enhance your Windows desktop. In the next part, we come to a program which is also highly used, especially in the years after 2020. This is called Teams. I guess every one of you knows it. You can just write chats, you can do online meetings, you can share files in Teams, you can create groups and so on. And yeah, this is backed by Microsoft, of course, and also costs if you are using it in a company and so on. But there's also great free software you can just start using right now, which is also very capable of many things Microsoft Teams has to offer. And I would say the most complete one is element.io. Element is using the matrix protocol, which is a decentral matrix protocol. So you can run your own server and you can also communicate with other servers if you want. And yeah, many organizations are already using Element. Under these are the Bundeswehr, it's the German military, for example. The NATO also uses it. Also the United States Space Force. So yeah, what do you want more? Element is a very easy tool where you can also do chatting, for example, uploading files, you can do meetings. This is also just a great all-in-one software I can really recommend you. And if you just want to make really quick online meetings, I'm doing these all the day, then I'm also using Jitsi, because with it you can do very easy and flexible video conferencing. You can just send someone a link and he can join with a smartphone, with a browser, also with some apps. And yeah, you can also, if you want, host it by yourself, but there's also a public available instance here by the official Jitsi creators. You can just start a meeting here, very easy. Yeah, I just joined a meeting right now, and yeah, you can do everything you want. You can start screen sharing, of course. You can invite some participants. You can also do breakout rooms, for example. You have a chat and so on. So very cool. You even can watch videos together, and this is all free and open source software you can use just right now. Both of these softwares you can either run on your own server, but also you can just get started because they are running some public servers. We can also, of course, with end-to-end encryption, run meetings and just be in your element, so to say. So there isn't any need for really using Microsoft Teams. And if you're looking for an alternative for schools, for example, then there's big blue button for virtual classroom software, which could also be very, very helpful in the school area. Let us come to another very familiar program. I guess many of you already know the open source alternative, but just to mention, we have Windows Media Player. I guess many of you know this icon very, very well, but there's also a other well-known icon which is replacing it and which is already open source software. Many of you are using this. Just to point it out, this is called VLC Media Player. Yeah, very easy. You can do multimedia streaming, playing on all platforms. You can do it on iOS, Android, but of course Windows, Mac OS and Linux. And yeah, it's also just created by a non-profit organization, which is called Videoland, we see here, and it literally supports everything. So this is a must-have on every computer you're using. But just to give a small reminder, if we, for example, have a look to Linux, then VLC is mostly not pre-installed, but Linux also comes with another so-called Windows Media Player in Linux Mint. It's, for example, called Celluloid. It is a really easy to use audio and videos app, which is quite easy to use. So you do not have to use VLC in every situation, but sometimes it could be very handy because VLC just supports almost everything. And if there's a video which isn't working, just try it with VLC. Last but not least, we come to another program which is very well known for many Windows users, and this is called Notepad++. Notepad++ is a very enhanced text editor which also supports many different things, and some of you are developing with it, or if you want to edit some big text files, this could come in handy because the default text editor on Windows is like shit. But on Linux, this is different. Every text editor, or almost every text editor under Linux, for example, also the pre-installed editor on Linux Mint, is very capable of many things. Let's just look at a SVG file. You can see there's also syntax highlighting. You can also, for example, indent some text with the tabulator key, and there are so many settings to change, and you can enhance it with your editor. For example, you could display line numbers. Then we have our lines. You could display an overview map on the other side. You can display a margin, for example, if you have to stick to a specific column limit. You can draw white space, for example, if we have something here, for example, the trailing white space. Then it is drawn as a single dot, for example. You could highlight the current line, for example. You could highlighting matching brackets. Then you can see in which brackets you are already in. And this is just the default text editor under Linux, for example. Very easy, very handy. But if you even want to use Notepad++ under Linux, this is also doable and installable via the Snap Store. Here we have it, snapcraft.io. And yeah, you can also run it on Linux, but I don't really recommend you. If you want to develop on Linux, there are also all the well-known IDEs, like for example Sublime or IntelliJ. I guess they have also many IDEs, but also I personally can recommend in which I am developing. This is called VS Code. VS Code is the Chrome version, if you want, of the VS Codium. It's a very enhanceable text editor for developing. It also runs, for example, Copilot. It has many extensions with all features you need to set up a complete IDE. And yeah, I'm using Visual Studio all the time, and I don't want to use anything else anymore. So if you're looking for a very capable text editor with all the features you can imagine of, just have a look to VS Code or VS Codium. Just a great program. And with this, Notepad++ can't even compete in any way. So just have a look to these programs. Visual Studio Code is the official one from Microsoft, also usable for Linux. But yeah, this isn't really free software. The real open source free software is VS Codium, but it's almost the same tool like Visual Studio Code, only with open source components. So just have a look right to it. So these were 10 different programs. I could recommend you some alternatives. But also we spoke about when you are really dependent on a software, you really have to use this Windows software. And for example, if you want to switch to Linux, or if you have to switch to a newer operating system version or to another environment, but you have to use this specific software and you can't find any alternatives, then there's also an option which is called, I call it Windows in a box, for example. There are some videos out there on YouTube. I'm also preparing a video for Linux Art where I can show you my process, how I can recommend running Windows in Linux. And this is just very easy. You have Windows as a full program on your Linux desktop. So just let me show it to you live. I'm just starting Windows here and we see, yeah, this is like a program, but it's a complete virtual computer where you can install whole operating systems in it. And in the end, we see our very well-known Windows 11 desktop, which I am just running on top of Linux, and there I can install almost every software you want. And yeah, if you're really dependent to one Windows software and you can't find any alternative, this could also be a very good option and a very stable one. There are also some options like wine or bottles you can use in Linux, but they are quite unstable, especially on updates. So I won't recommend you using these in production. So if you want to use some Windows app in production but want to stay on Linux, then this could be your great option. In the end and in the long run, I highly recommend you, of course, to switch fully to Linux runnable software or to open source software fully. This is doable. But yeah, of course, this is not doable from the one to the other day. So it takes months or even years to find alternatives and to really get familiar to the other alternatives. So yeah, it's just a process, I would say. At the current time, if you are running Windows and you want to change to Linux at a later point of time, or even if you don't want to change to Linux, I highly recommend you just to switch to software I presented you today. These are all great software full versions. These are no trial versions or anything you have to pay later for it. They are completely free. It's just a great community around it. So I think there's now everything said in this video about alternatives and free open source alternatives to well-known Windows software. So which software are you using? Which software also you can recommend to other people, which is open source or free software? Just let me know it into the comments. If you found this video helpful, please leave a like and subscribe to this YouTube channel, because every week we are releasing new stuff around Linux and open source software. So just make sure to hit the subscribe button and see you in the next one. Bye.